Long before the arrival of the Europeans, New England was the home for many Native Americans. Their tribes were great in number: the Nipmucks, the Pequots, the Massachusetts, and the Mohegans. There were Wampanoags and Narragansetts, Pocumtucks, Nyantics, and Nausetts. Many of the Indians who live in New England today are descendants of the original tribes. They are school teachers and policemen, lawyers, bankers, but they have one thing in common. They are all Native Americans.
The Native American Television Project presents People of the First Light, Indians of Southern New England.
The rich history and traditions of the Indians of southern New England have not been lost. They have been preserved and carried on by members of the tribes. Tall Oak, a Narragansett living in southern Rhode Island, gathers quahog shells from the seashore to make wampum, just as it was made hundreds of years ago by Narragansetts living in the area.
Wampum. Wampum was the word that the English used for the beads that we made out of the shells. We used two kinds of shells to make wampum. Wampum itself was not Indian money, as most people think. If you mention the word wampum today, instantly people think of a little joke about Indian money, but we never had money in our culture. Money was an altogether different concept to Indian people. The first thing that you do when you begin the process of making wampum is to break off part of the shell. After you break off the shell, you have what we call Pequot, or a vise, that was used just for holding the wampum while you worked the piece and shaped it into a bead. And then we take a special rubbing stone. This is a sandstone was used, and we call this Kawampsk in our language. And we start to rub. And there was no rush. You took your time. We didn't have any time clock. We didn't have any clock. And we worked until we were finished. And you keep going until you have it perfectly smooth. After we have the bead in position on the drill, on the Pequot vise, then we pick up the drill, which we call pughummon. And I have a steel point on here now, a steel drill point, but in the old days, before we had metal that we traded for, we had stone drills. But as soon as we had the metal drills, we started to use those. And you position it right in the middle of the bead. Sometimes the drill will move. Just put it back in position. And keep going until you've finished. You remove your drill, and then you loosen your tie on your Pequot again until you have the bead come out. And here you have the bead from the side view, and here you can see the finished bead, the front view where it's been drilled from, and the wampum shell that bead was made from. To the English, the wampum became money, but to Indian people, we must never forget the spiritual value that the wampum beads have had to us. The wampum was the secret of the strength of the people. The wampum belts told our history. They told us of our past. From these small beads, a great nation was built.
Just as the tradition of wampum making is kept alive by Narragansetts like Tall Oak, Other Indians from other tribes maintained their history in much the same way. Teddy Kondo is a young Micmac boy. Although his family now lives in the city of Boston, the land of his people, the Micmac tribe, is in New Brunswick, Canada. Last summer, Teddy went back to the Micmac reservation and prepared this report on his visit for his class at school.
I'd like to show some slides about when I went up to Canada in Restigouche, and about a person I met, and his name is Tom MacDonald. This is a map of northeastern United States, and on it you can see Boston down the bottom here, which is where we are. And up top, you can see New Brunswick, Canada, and that's where the Micmac Reserve I went to is, and it's called Restigouche. One of the people I met up there was Tom MacDonald. He's a Micmac Indian, and when he was a kid, his parents would cut down trees and make baskets from the wood, and he would go around all over the country selling the baskets. He learned how to make baskets from his parents, and when I was with him, he showed me how to make baskets the same way. The wood he uses is called white ash, and it's really strong. The first thing he has to do is split the wood, and he uses a sharp axe and a mallet. It looks pretty easy, but it takes a lot of experience to do it. After he gets the wood split into a small enough piece, he then has to make it smooth and square. He uses something called a draw horse and sits on it. And by pushing it with his feet, the top of the draw horse bites down on the piece of the wood and holds it tight. He then uses a special knife called a draw knife, and he shaves the whole piece of wood until it is just the way he wants it. The next thing he does, and this is the part I like the best, he takes the piece of wood he's just finished shaving and he starts to pound on it with the back of the axe. He hits all along the piece of wood and he tries to hit it evenly each time. After a while, the wood begins to separate along the grain. I really don't know why it happens, but you can see it doing it. That's one of the reasons why he uses white ash, because you can't do this with just any kind of wood. The pieces of wood that separate out become the strips that are used to make the basket. When he starts the basket, he makes the bottom first. He weaves the pieces in and out, kind of overlapping them, and he keeps doing this until he has 7 strips along one way, 11 strips going the other. And then he gets them really tight to make the basket strong. Then he bends the loose ends over to make the corners around the bottom of the basket. And then he starts to make the sides over the basket just like he did the bottom. He takes a long strip and goes in and out and in and out all the way around the basket, and where that piece ends, he begins another piece, and he keeps on doing that until he goes all the way around, all the way up, and makes the sides as big as he wants it. When he gets to the top, he takes a knife and evens off the ends and puts points on them. Then he bends the ends over and weaves the points back into the sides of the basket. And this is what holds them in place and keeps the basket from coming apart. And this is the basket Tom made.
Teddy Kondo and other Indians living in southern New England can learn much about their history and traditions. But to learn the full story of the Indians who once lived in this area, it is necessary to go back in history. The first Indians of southern New England built their homes near the lakes and rivers. This was not just to be near fresh water, but also to gather the fish that was an important part of their food supply. These people were hunters and fishermen. The animals, birds, and fish were in such great numbers that the people could remain in the same place for a long time. so their homes were very sturdy. They were built in the shape of a circle. Using the forest trees and bark, they could be made very large. This way of life, hunting and fishing, lasted for a great number of years. Then, about 2,000 years ago, they began to plant a kind of corn known as maize, and with farming came the need to follow the seasons, planting and harvesting and storing for winter. So the homes of the Indian people became smaller. They are called wigwams. Wigwams can be taken down and set up whenever an Indian family needs to move. They are made of mats, laid over a light frame made of wood. The mats are made from the reeds that grow wild near the rivers and lakes, and usually wigwams were homes for only one family. These were the early Indian people who would later come to be known as Eastern Woodland Tribes. Years ago, the Indians living in southern New England gathered much of their food from the sea, and today the tribes living along the coast still rely on the sea for clams and oysters, as well as many types of fish. But much has changed in the years. Bill Peters is a Wampanoag Indian living in Mashpee, Massachusetts.
My name is Bill Peters, and I'm a Wampanoag Indian. I am known to my people as Little Owl. I work on the tribal aqua farm, which is pretty much like any other farm. We cultivate, plant, and harvest, but it's all done underwater. Our crop is quahogs. Quahog is like a clam, and quahogs come in all sizes. There are little necks, cherry stones, and the bulls, which are the largest. Quahogs are used in stews, chowders, and other dishes. The Wampanoags have always lived near the sea, and seafood, especially quahogs, have always been an important part of our diet. It used to be that members of the tribe could just go to the sea and get quahogs, but it's not that easy now. A lot of people have moved into the area, and they've fenced off beaches and areas where the quahogs grow. And now there are only a few areas left where we can go to get quahogs. That's why we started the aqua farm. Quahogs grow on the ocean bottom, either in mud or sand, depending on the area. The best bottom for growing them is light sand with a fairly swift current. We plant quahogs when they're about the size of your fingernail, and it takes about a year for them to grow. When they're ready to harvest, they're about the size of your fist and weigh up to about a half a pound. From time to time throughout the year, we go down and check on how they're doing. They're easy enough to find because their shell's color is usually lighter than the sand around them. Just like any crop, quahogs have to be tended. Cold winters can kill the little ones, and the crabs and fish will attack them if their shell is broken. The shell is very hard and good protection, but sometimes crabs get them open or the shells will break. And if the shell is broken, the quahog is as good as gone. Besides crabs, there's red tide, starfish, and other problems in aqua farming. Once the aqua farm gets going full scale, there should be plenty of seafood for the tribe once again. Members will be able to come to the aqua farm and take what they need. They won't have to pay anything because it's as much their food as it is ours. It's for the whole tribe, not just for those of us who work here. The tribe is like a big family, and every member is like a brother or a sister. We share what we have. That's the Indian way.
The aqua farm is just one of many activities in which individual members of the Wampanoag tribe work for the good of all. Another, and a very popular activity, is the annual clam bake, which takes place each year during the Mashpee powwow. For many of the tourists and visitors who attend each year, the clam bake is the high point of the powwow. This is not the case, however, for the Wampanoags and Narragansetts, the Pequots and Scatticooks, the Micmac and the Mohegan. Members of these and other tribes who come from throughout New England and beyond come not for the clam bake, but rather to simply spend this weekend together. Casual visitors to Mashpee see the food stands and the jewelry for sale. They hear the drumming and chanting and watch the dance contests. What they do not see and cannot feel is the spirit of brotherhood and harmony that exists for the Native Americans who attend. The powwow is a time for tribal leaders to meet and exchange greetings, to talk of the successes and failures of the past year. It is a time to give and seek counsel. The powwow is also a time for religious ceremonies. Some of these are held in public, like the passing of the pipe and the prayers to the Great Spirit for guidance. Presiding over the powwow and all the ceremonies of the weekend is the medicine man, who is the spiritual leader of the tribe. The Indians living in southern New England today have many things in common, but it would be a mistake to think that they are all the same. Teddy Kondo is a student in Boston. Tall Oak lives in a small town in Rhode Island. Bill Peters is an aqua farmer on Cape Cod in Massachusetts. Where you live often affects how you live. Charlie Rogers is a Western Pequot who lives on a reservation in Ledyard, Connecticut. One of the tribal projects for the Western Pequot is maple sugaring.
This is really a beautiful tree here, Charlie. And she's running really slow. Just about the end of the season. We're not going to get too much more sap this year.
How many gallons of syrup could a tree this size produce?
You get a gallon per day per tap when the season is at its peak. And then a lot of it depends on the weather, too. Let's take a walk down and check some of these other buckets. On a real sunny day like today, your trees will produce more syrup. On a cloudy day, when the sun isn't shining, the sap doesn't run as fast. This one isn't running at all. See that tree over there, the one with a big top on it?
Yeah.
The more branches there are and the more limbs.
The more sap you get?
Yeah, that has a lot to do with it. Because your tree has to produce more sap for the branches, to make the buds, to make the leaves. This tree here must be a couple hundred years old. This is a good example of a sap root here. See how long it is? And when you're looking to drill the hole for the spile, you want to put your spile a couple of feet above that sap root. Here's an old hole from last year. Eventually that'll heal right over, just like a cut on your hand will heal. And you take your spile, it goes right through those little grooves there. See it? See the hole? And then it runs right, trickles right down there and drips into your bucket. One little drip at a time. It does that all day long, and eventually you'll get about a gallon. Hey, let's go up and see how the other people are doing. We'll give them a hand. Okay, Richard. We only got one bucket on this tree. We're going to put another one. Now, when you're drilling your hole, you follow your sap root, and you come up about a couple of feet, and you put a hole right here, okay? Crank it. Okay, you want to drill it in about 1.5 inches, just past these curls here. You have to really push on it now. Okay. That's good. See the sap? See, it's starting to flow already. Okay, now you take your spile, you take your hook, and you put that on the end of the spile, and we'll stick that right in the hole. That hook is to hang your bucket on. Go ahead and put the lid. The lid helps to keep the bugs and the rain out of your sap. There you go. Charlie, you want to hang the bucket? You should get about a gallon of sap a day per tree. So if it's running good, you dump your buckets every day.
Okay.
Takes about 35 to 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup. It's a pure product, comes right out of the tree. All you're doing is removing the water from it.
Okay, hang it back up on the tree.
How much sap you got?
A little bit.
Okay, you ready to take back up to the barrel?
How come?
Got to be pumped up to the evaporator.
Oh. How come we're dumping it in here?
Well, we have to relay it from here to the main evaporator, and we also have 4 other groves we pump up over the hill to this main station to make it easier for us instead of carrying it up over the hill by hand. So what we'll do now is we'll start the machine, pump it up over the hill, and we'll check it up there and see what goes on. We pump it up through here and it comes up through the hose.
How long?
Into the container.
Do you know how long the hose is?
Well, the hose is quite a ways. I'd say it's about to go to 150 yards down below. See, then the main feed, it goes into here. Then over here, you'll see the tubes come down through. And the sap flows into the evaporator in there.
How much gallons does that hold?
That's a 300-gallon container. And what we do is we run it through here. And it goes into the main evaporator. The sap goes in, we boil that off, and we make it into syrup. Okay.
How hot does it gotta be before it's ready to...
It's got to go to 220 before we can actually get syrup out of it.
How much gallons of syrup could it hold?
Well, the tank holds the evaporator holds 250 gallons of sap water.
Can I taste it?
Yeah, you can taste it. Just come over here. How's it look, Rich?
It's really good.
All right, that's good. And you want to try some syrup?
Yeah, what does this do?
Well, we got a double filtering system in here. You pour the syrup in there, and then it filters it to 2 filters, and when it comes down here, it's pure syrup like you put on your pancakes.
Oh.
I'll take a little bit out, and I'll show you.
Wow.
All right, now stick your finger in there and taste it.
That's good.
At one time, all of the land in southern New England belonged to the Indians. Over the years, however, the land was taken from them, often by deceit and by treachery. Today, the Indians of southern New England have very little land, and some have no land at all.
Eddie, what are your feelings as you walk through this beautiful park with all the beautiful trees and everything? What are your feelings about this?
Well, it kind of touches me pretty deeply because... Hello, my name is Eddie Van Allen. I'm a Mohegan Indian, and I live in Hartford, Connecticut. My tribe, the Mohegan, have a lot in common with the other tribes in the state, but in some ways we're very different. I guess the biggest difference is the land. You see, we're the only tribe that doesn't have a reservation of our own.
Herbs from the trees and from the
This is my father, Fred Van Allen. My father cares a great deal about our people and our tribe.
Here we see softball games, picnics enjoyed by the residents, many of whom may not be of Mohegan or Indian heritage. We wonder if they realize that this beautiful land that they are enjoying does not really belong to them, but does belong to the Mohegan people. What is your idea of the way that this land was lost by the Mohegan people?
Didn't the Mohegan Indian, who was a sachem at that time, Uncas, deed his land over to his friend Mason?
Yes, this is true. He did that. And then what happened?
I think Mason, who was an Englishman, I think he died.
And he died.
And there was no way that Uncas could prove that the land was actually his.
About to approach the Mohegan Indian burial ground. Now, look at that sign. What does that say to you?
It shows the influence that the English have on the Indians and have always had since they came.
Exactly. And it also shows the disrespect of the English and the people for the sacred ground of the Native American Mohegan Indians. And as we walk down through this cemetery, we do see many graves, some of which are nothing but a slab of stone, unmarked. Nobody knows who these people are. They could be people who are directly related to us. Now, here is a stone here that states the last speaker of the Mohegan Pequot language in Connecticut. Now, when you speak of language, this has to do with culture. It's very important. How do you think we should go about getting this land back? Should we wait and go through the courts? Should we demonstrate, as other groups have done, to maintain their rights? Or how should we go about getting this land back?
Well, we somehow have to prove. Someday we hope this land will be returned to us. We know that if it is, our culture will remain strong, and our people will always be able to call themselves Mohegans.
Eddie Van Allen and the other Indians you've seen in this program are just a few of the many Native Americans living in southern New England today. In many ways, they are different, and yet, in many ways, they are the same. For although they are from different tribes with different histories and traditions, they are all Native Americans. They are all the first people of this land.